Sorry I'm getting started a little bit late. I kind of like to, just like when I'm having a dinner party, I like to serve dinner a little late, because that way people are a little more hungry and appreciate it a little more. I wasn't sure how to start this off, whether this was meant to be a biographical sketch of Prakash, his accomplishments, or whether it was meant to be me stealing his thunder and telling him what I think his legacy is, or whether it's meant to be a roast. I'm not quite sure. So we'll get a little bit involved with that. So Prakash has a well-established contribution here at the agency. And one of the first things you think when you hear legacy, you think, well, okay, David Mobley, who was here for 40, 50 years, or Ken Shear, who was here, and everybody in the community knew him, they were here for a long, long time. Prakash started here back in 2003 in the NOAA group, which was had an agreement with the EPA, with the National Exposure Research Lab. And so he hasn't been here all that long. So he's been 11 years, and so you ask, well, what's the legacy? So I first heard about Prakash leaving, like most of you did, through his email that said he wasn't leaving. So we all got this all-hands email from Prakash saying, the rumors are not true, I'm not leaving. And eventually you read through it and you said, yet. And so I think with this, I think Prakash is saying he is leaving. But part of that, his sending that email out is part of, I think, Prakash's legacy. He's very inclusive with his communication. He's very thoughtful. He's very caring. I don't think there's anybody that really has paid more attention to other people and their diversity than Prakash. I mean, I think of all the people that worked for me, Prakash worked in the Research Planning and Coordination Group in Neural, and one of the things that he brought to that was his thoughtful nature. He's always doing an analysis. If you know Prakash, you know there's always a spreadsheet, there's always some sort of diagram depicting percentages and whatnot, and he's got some thoughtful algorithm that he's working on. And at one point we had done a program review, and Prakash had come up with this pie within a pie within a pie, and it was kind of, somehow he incorporated space and time into his first three dimensions in this analysis of the program. And it evolved itself into, we can think about the value of our research. And at one point, Prakash was starting to work on an algorithm that we can look at the value of our research. And one of the members on the planning and coordination group, and this was a neural level, higher level management meeting, and one of the people just said, I don't know if I'm witnessing, either just complete lunacy or one of the greatest moments in science history. And so there are many times if you work with Prakash that you come across these analysis and conclusions, and you think, so this goes back to Prakash being a Berkeley, Caltech kind of a guy. So, go back. So, he's a very thorough guy, and I just would go back to that, those of us who've worked with him, and I know everybody here, it looks, when I was looking through and see, everybody here is in general the AIR community. And it's a big community here at the agency. And people talk about, being out of the loop and not understanding what's going on. But what they don't realize is, this is just a small subsection, but it is an important subsection of the AIR community here at ORD. And I think it's a subsection that Prakash himself has managed to have some impact in. And I would relate another legacy, that within ORD we have these planning teams, and we've got to communicate across, and we've got to communicate externally. And I would say, one of the legacies I think is that Prakash brought to that is his caring and sensitivity. So I know he's got a lot of scientific accomplishments, and that's why anybody would be lucky to have him. But I think on top of that, I think his greatest legacy is the again, I'll say it the third time, the caring and sensitivity, because I think he's always formed a team around him, has always made people feel valued for who they are and what they can bring to the team, and has always had that different outside perspective, that when you least expect it, there's another variable or parameter that Prakash introduces into it that none of us in the room are thinking about. So I think I didn't have to use the standard you'll be lucky if you can get them to work for you type letter of recommendation for Prakash, because that can be interpreted both ways. You'll be lucky if once you hire him, you can get them to work for you. And that's not Prakash. I would say that anybody that has Prakash on their team, whether it's air, whether it's chess, whether it's bicycling, whatever it is, you'll be lucky to have Prakash on the team. And I think, to me, in only 11 years, you've helped us form, I think, a better team. And that's probably not something you're going to brag about or point out, but I think it's something that we should all recognize you for. So, with that.
Thanks for that very kind introduction, and thank you all for coming out this afternoon. It really means a lot to me, whether it's to wish me well on the next chapter in my career or to hear what I have to say here, a little bit of both. I appreciate it. I'll dedicate this lecture to the memory of Jay Messer. Jay was in our division, atmospheric modeling division, when I joined in 2003. Over the years that we overlapped, we became friends, often eating lunch together, once in a while going for jogs around the lake. I only overlapped with Jay for maybe the last quarter of his career, but during that time he made substantial contributions to the EPA report on the environment. He worked with Rick Linthurst to develop the first Sustainable Healthy Communities national research program. And for several years before his retirement, he actually supported me and encouraged me in starting this legacy lecture series. For those of you who've worked with me, you know it takes me a while to get started on things, and this was no different. It wasn't until I learned that Jay himself was retiring that I finally got over the inertia to start the series, and I asked Jay if he would be willing to give the inaugural lecture, and he did graciously accept that. I'm sure if Jay were here, he would have tried to attend the lecture and probably would have had some really nice, thoughtful critique afterwards for me. I've given instructions to several legacy lecture speakers about kind of what the do's and don'ts, most of which Jay kind of referred to me. And now putting together the talk myself, I found how difficult it is to follow those do's and don'ts, and I'll try today to express gratitude. But as Jay put it, we don't want a typical retirement speech. I guess it has to be, we'll try to make it a little bit more formal. There's a hope here to be a little bit provocative, share some thoughts that have been kicking around in the back of my head, and maybe I was too shy to share them before, or maybe I shared them and wasn't sure if it was lunacy or something brilliant. But I guess the challenge always is to do that without being offensive. And I'm pretty sure I scrubbed everything out of this talk that could be perceived as offensive. But one thing I've learned from working in ORD for 11 years is you can never predict how your words are going to be misinterpreted by different people in different seats. And so just to err on the safe side, I'll do this one Sanskrit prayer. It's a secular prayer. Om Sarve Bhavantu Sukhinaha Sarve Santu Niramayaha Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu Ma Kaschit Dukkha Bhag Bhavet. And with that, I ask you all to give me the benefit of the doubt if I offend unintentionally, as well as if I come across as being pompous, which is what Ken Shear, our last legacy lecturer, said. The hardest thing for him was to give the talk without coming across as being pompous, and I'll strive to do as well as Ken did in that regard. Last month, I had the pleasure as I was flying back from Kathmandu to watch a full season of The Big Bang Theory, which David had been telling me about for a couple of years. And I really enjoyed it. I was laughing my head off keeping all the other passengers awake through the night. But I think anyone who's seen this show probably identifies with one or more of the characters, and as I watched it, I really identified with this guy, Leonard. And but then some of the things that Sheldon would say were things that I've thought before, but I've put a trap on my mouth because trying to be politically correct. And in today's talk, I might show a little bit of my Sheldon-esque personality. So I'll not go through these objectives in order, but sort of try to navigate between, avoiding being offensive, avoiding being pompous, and then expressing gratitude when I want to do something safe. And then just to make sure that you've forgotten anything self-deprecating that I said throughout the talk, I'll end with some pictures of Nepal and hopefully transition us to the reception unscathed. Let me start by thanking my parents, Vittal and Charu Bhave. They moved to this country 40 years ago from India in search of a better life for themselves and their future children, and as well as so they could save money to send money to their siblings back home. They imparted too many values on me that I could share in the lecture, but definitely my father especially impressed upon me the importance of education. Some of my mentors early in my career are pictured here. At Berkeley, my two favorite professors in air pollution were Bill Nazaroff and Rob Harley. I wanted to be just like them when I grew up. Towards the end of my undergrad years, I got lucky to be a summer intern at Environ Corporation. That's the group in Novato that develops the CAMEX model. Our sworn enemies, I guess. My boss there, Allison Polak, was nearing the end of her career. I couldn't find a picture of her. I think it's already packed up in our boxes. But Allison really urged me not to take a full-time job at Environ right after my bachelor's and nudged me towards doing a PhD, and I got to thank her for that. Rob Harley and Bill Nazaroff, it turns out, both went to Caltech for graduate school. They both did their PhD under Glenn Cass, so in an effort to follow in their footsteps, I joined his group as well in 1998. For those of you who've been in the air pollution business maybe for more than 15 years, you've probably interacted with Glenn at some point through the HEI or through the KSAC or even through the STAR grants. He was a frequent recipient of STAR grants. Glenn's not been around for a while now, but his PhD students are definitely his living legacy. I was fortunate to be the last of 20 of his PhD students. Some of the more famous ones are listed up here. If you didn't interact with Glenn directly and you're in the air pollution business, you probably interacted with some of them. A couple of them, in fact, joined the ranks of EPA. Daryl Winter and Chris Nolte, who's here today. On each of us, Glenn imparted an extremely high level of scholarship. Glenn was a perfectionist, and those of his students that were more successful really figured out a way to walk that balance between perfectionism and excellence. It's something I'm still working on. I'll say a few words about the work I did at Caltech under Glenn. When I got there, they had just completed a trajectory field experiment across the Los Angeles basin. So they set up monitoring sites at Long Beach, Fullerton, and Riverside, and there happened to be a few air trajectories that passed right by each of the sites when they were sampling. My predecessor in the group, Mike Kleeman, had developed an air quality model, a Lagrangian model at the time, that was a little bit different than other particle models. It tracked the particle packets from different source categories separately. So a particle that came from a diesel source would be evolving differently in the atmosphere than one, let's say, from a ship that had more sulfur in the particle, because it would take up more amounts of water and secondary inorganics. And so all these particles are tracked as they're transported across the basin, and at the end of a simulation we'd have information like for each particle type. We'd know the number, concentration of that particle, the size, its density, its chemical composition, even its source and its age. And so that was a very rich data set, but it was just a model. No way to verify until Kim Prather's group at UC Riverside developed this single particle mass spectrometer device, which would measure the size of individual particles and then blast them with a laser that would ablate and ionize the particles, and then you could get a mass spectrum from an individual particle, and looking at the peaks, figure out what that particle contained. And so this was a nice opportunity by the time I joined the group to compare results from this model against measurements from this state-of-the-art instrument. And just one example of what I did there. So this is a unique kind of look at the particle population. It's one way that we don't normally look at particles. So I'll explain it briefly. So there's 100 circles in this box, and what these represent are each one is 1% of the particle population in this 1 to 1.8 micron diameter range measured in Long Beach. And so this is measurements and this is model results. So basically, we were able to show that the model was able to capture with pretty good fidelity the composition and the mixing state of this particle mass. So here are 9 circles, right, with red and blue. That indicates that there was 9% of the particles in that size range that had both sodium and nitrate, but didn't have ammonium and carbon and dust. And the measurements show the same thing. So typically when you collect particles on a filter, you don't get this information. All the particles are mixed together and you get some bulk composition. Typically when you model aerosol, you also don't track the individual particles from different sources, so you wouldn't get this type of information. So that was kind of the cool stuff that we were doing at Caltech at the time. Also at that time, turned out that the person who was doing PM modeling for the federal government was deciding to retire. There's Frank Binkowski. I don't believe Frank could make it today, but Frank was the pioneer of the CMAC aerosol module. Although he retired before I joined here, we had chances to work together and I got to learn a lot from him. Also, Ed Etney, who is in the audience, Ed, is a pioneer in quantifying secondary organic aerosol, and I had the fortune of climbing on his shoulders as well early in my time here. A brief bit of thanks to the 3 suckers that decided to hire me. They were the ones who interviewed the various candidates, so thanks to John, Rob, and Ken. I read this book a few years ago, really liked it, by Malcolm Gladwell called Outliers. And throughout the book, Malcolm Gladwell questions whether successful people deserve all the credit that we give them. And he talks about many different ideas in there. And one of them is this 10,000-hour rule, which he says is the key to success in any field. So he talks about how Bill Gates had over 10,000 hours of computer programming experience before he went to college. Some Canadian all-star hockey players had 10,000 hours of playing time. The Beatles had 10,000 hours of performance time before they really made it big. And then he also talks about how there's this element of luck. It's not just doing 10,000 hours of something random, but having it also be something that's valued by society at the right time. And I really feel like, looking back, I didn't think of this at the time, but now, looking back, I was probably the only person in the agency when I joined in 2003 who had 10,000 hours of experience modeling the fine particle composition and concentrations. And it happened to be at the perfect time when PM 2.5 was a really important pollutant for the agency. We were regulating just past the first national ambient air quality standards for it, and monitoring networks were deployed. And so, in a way, I was an outlier and probably got a lot more praise than I deserved over the years here. An outlier in a few other ways. Again, these weren't things that I thought about as I was going through my years here, but because of an inordinate amount of time I spent on the speech and debate team in high school, I had over 3,000 hours of public speaking, which really helped briefing program offices, OAQPS, OTAC especially, and also representing our modeling program at different conferences. From high school onwards, I was always kind of taking leadership roles in different clubs and organizations, and those really helped me in the division to lead the chemistry and aerosol work group, and also to foster a lot of the fruitful interactions with the other air, climate, energy matrix interfaces like Carlos and Alan, who are in the audience. I remember a conversation I had with Neeta, my wife, who's here in the front. Probably the first month that I was working, I think I just attended the first meeting for me of the model development team. So we were trying to matrix the division at that time under ST, and there were these teams and branches. So anyways, I was telling Neeta about the model development team and something about nitrate and whether secondary or organic aerosol is reversible or irreversible. I think that was the topic of the day. And at the end of my monologue, Neeta says, so let me get this straight. Your team is Jeff, John, Jerry, Sean, Jim, and Prakash. And it just had not dawned on me in that meeting because I never felt any different for being, from a different ethnic background, and I'm appreciative of that. One way, though, that I did definitely feel different was my age. For the longest time, I think I was the youngest one in the division. The median age at the time was 55. When I joined the division, I was a whopping 30 years younger. I thought for the first couple of months that Sean Roselle is only a few years older than me. Found out I was off by a decade or so. ST couldn't be here today. He's in Germany at an air quality conference. I actually didn't get to interact much with ST directly. He's a pretty private individual, and he maintained a lot of communication with the branch chiefs, and we learned about his ideas and for the division through them generally for the first part of when I was here anyway. But one thing that I learned just by observation of ST is he took a really aggressive approach to hiring and recruiting that I think was a departure from some of the other, maybe his predecessors, others in the lab. So he didn't really go for safe hires, hiring your existing on-site contractor or existing postdoc or a local university student. He really went for kind of nationwide recruitments, and I'm fortunate that he did that because I would never have gotten this job if it hadn't been. Here are the bunch of people that were hired into the division under ST. And we had people not just from local universities, which we did, some awesome people from local universities, I'll point them out. But as well, we had PhDs coming from the University of Texas at Austin, Carnegie Mellon, Rutgers, Caltech. And it made for a very enriching environment to work in. I was fortunate to get to work with almost each and every one of these on an individual basis in some capacity or another. During my second year in Neural, I signed up for the Neural Mentorship Program. And I think they had it a couple more years after that, but it hasn't been active for a while. I was paired with Chuck Lewis, who is a senior scientist in Neural. And it was a really nice program. Once a month for about a year, we'd meet for lunch and talk about goals and things. I learned through the mentor program that we should set not just random goals, but smart ones that are specific and measurable and action-oriented and realistic and time-bound, I think. But what made this mentorship relationship most productive, and this is a little bit of advice for anyone who's earlier in their career than I am, like the guy sitting next to Jackie, to make these goals really, really useful, or actually to make them come to reality, the key things were to, number one, write them down. So a goal that's written down has a little bit more longevity than one that just flies through your brain. And secondly, to share them with somebody who will hold you accountable to them. So again, writing them down and sticking them in your desk drawer doesn't do quite as much good as sharing them with a mentor. And I was really lucky to have Chuck as my mentor. He was a very patient listener. Let's see. And he always had some very, very thoughtful advice and guidance, and actually really helped me shape my vision and my goals in the early part of my career. I found the paper that I'd written my goals down on and typed them up here. So Chuck and I together, we've worked out this 5-year vision statement. This is the vision for the branch or the group, just for myself. And I'll let you read that. But along with that vision came 5 more SMART goals. And we'll go through those either. They're kind of they're there. But essentially, yeah, I realized that to achieve this vision, it wouldn't be accomplishable alone. I'd have to be very active at collaborating. I'd have to have good rapport with my management, and also I'd need a lot of help. And at the time, I thought it would come through student and postdoctoral support. Interestingly, I had this fifth goal down here, which wasn't realized during the 5-year visionary period, but probably it's going to in the next 5 years. We'll talk about more of that a little later. For my observation, the greatest reward for being an outlier in ORD was the opportunity, the resources to work with postdocs and to mentor really wonderful postdocs. I was really lucky to have a string of them, one after the other. I think several of them are here. I'll just name them off. Give a shout out to Adam Reff and Heather Simon and Garnet Erdakowitz, who's in California. Chris Nolte, Jim Kelly just had a baby a couple weeks ago and he couldn't be here. But each of them just did wonderful work in the division. They were very nice to take the direction that I gave them and turn it into something better. I learned more from them probably than they did from me, as is the case in most mentoring relationships. Together with them and with a bunch of other people in the division, we were able to realize that vision for the aerosol modeling treatment in CMAQ. So here's a couple of graphs to display that. So this was the model performance, the very first time CMAQ was run for a full annual cycle across the country. And these are comparisons against rural measurement sites for different species of fine particulates. So we were very biased high for nitrate, grossly underestimating organic carbon and doing about right for sulfate. When you added the three together, it turned out that we had about the right amount of PM 2.5 mass, but it was the right answer for wrong reasons. And that wasn't the fault of anybody who had worked on this before me. It was just the very first time this was tried, and that was the state of affairs. But we had these peer review panels that would come through and review CMAQ, and the very first review panel really came down hard on the PM components in CMAQ. I think it was the biggest criticism of that review panel, of us by that review panel. There's also this quote here that I got secondhand from John Seinfeld, who's the pioneer of the field of air quality modeling. Since the 1970s, he's been pushing the envelope of this field for the last 4 decades. And basically, it was a little bit of a disparaging comment about how CMAQ is not quite ready for use in research studies because it wasn't quite at the state of the science. So 10 years later, here's the same kind of model performance against basically similar sites for, again, the full annual cycles. And clearly the biases for nitrate and organic carbon have come way down. This is not just, again, work that we did on the CMAQ module, but it's an illustration. There's also major efforts made to improve the emission inventory and the meteorology and massive team effort, but it's really a success for all of us. And then with that came some accolades. The fourth CMAQ peer review panel had quite the opposite view on the PM treatment in CMAQ, which is really nice to read. And then one morning I walked in my office and opened my email and I saw this message from John Seinfeld addressed to me saying, my group is ready to implement a 3D model for LA, and what I'd like to use most is the latest version of CMAQ, including aerosols. So we really came a long way in that decade. This is a plot I like to show. It turns out that when we look at the individual components of PM and compare them with measurements, shown here as CSN, it's not any of the bulk chemical components of PM 2.5 that we have the greatest error. It's not the sulfate or the nitrate or the carbon or ammonium. It's now this other kind of largely unmeasured material that's our biggest bias. And when I present this to people from other countries, they're kind of blown away. They're like, what's PM other? What are you guys talking about? Because they're still focused on getting the nitrate and the carbon and the sulfate right. And I don't think they even have quantified, many of them, what the PM other is, and certainly not what the other bias is. But that's really where our focus has been for the last several years. And that's not to say that there's everything else in the model is perfect. There's definitely room for improvement, but we're comfortably ahead of most of the other countries in terms of particulate modeling. Okay, so let me dance back from pompous to gratitude. See, my branch chief, Ken Shear, who I'm really very grateful he made it today, for the first 5 years here, those were really the best years of my scientific career thus far, even better than grad school and better than these recent years. Ken, as a manager, he provided that perfect balance of providing motivation when it was needed, direction, but enough latitude to take some risks, make some errors. A few times I had interpersonal conflicts with others in the division, and Ken was there to support me emotionally. And then I have no doubt that if it weren't for Ken's advocacy, I wouldn't have had that string of wonderful postdocs to work on the aerosol module in CMAC. Anyone who was in Ken's branch during that time period would agree with me, I think, that we were totally spoiled in the atmospheric model development branch by Ken. And my view on management, I think, is if Ken had remained as my branch chief, I probably never would have pursued a position in management, because it's like the dream for any scientist to have all these things taken care of so perfectly by your supervisor, so that you can focus on scientific advancements. Dave promised a chart, so here's an analysis. Something I did around the time when Ken was moving on to the science advisor role. I started charting my happiness relative to my productivity in my lab notebook. The rest of our notes go in the code, right? So we have to write something in the lab notebook. But so happiness is obviously a qualitative measure, and for me it was feeling good at the end of the workday. And productivity could be measured many ways. For me, it was making advancements to the model, or writing a manuscript, or preparing some figure from some analysis for some presentation. And during my entire graduate school period and the first few years here, it was a linear relationship, right? So the more productive I was, the more things I accomplished, the happier. And but after a while, I guess. More responsibilities got piled on, and although productivity continued to rise, that's the x-axis, happiness kind of leveled off, and at times, you do more work, but at the end of the day, you're stressed out more. And partly, I think it's just there's less time to relish the successes, and that, so there goes the linear relationship, right? And then kind of this downward trend, right? So we start to stress out even more and get more work piled on. And I tried for some years in vain to reduce my workload. I even started keeping in my journal the number of times I said no to somebody who asked to collaborate or have help on some technical piece. It didn't really work out for me, although that journal is pretty much full of things that I said no to. Eventually, there was many unhappy work days. These are supposed to be teardrops. The hysteresis was kind of that way, and eventually burnout. I got to know the security guards at EPA pretty well. Officer Buckley, did you make it today? So Officer Buckley was always there to greet me with a smile when I'd come in after the kids went to bed. And then he would tease me when I was leaving home in the middle of the night. So this aerosol modeling component was purportedly the highest priority for the division, according to our peer reviews and according to our partners. And it seemed to me, and this was my argument with my supervisors around this time, 2007, 8, 9 maybe, is that we should have more staff assigned to it. And we should add those staff before any employee reaches this brink and starts heading down this part of the curve. I think, well, let's see. At times like now, that we don't have the flexibility to hire, and so there's probably an alternate solution, and that is when people get to that period, maybe after 7, 10 years or whatever it is, they need a break. If there isn't infusion of resources and other people to help to do the work, then a sabbatical program is probably the way to go. This was one of the chief recommendations, actually. This isn't so provocative because the peer review panel for our division in 2009 stated this is one of their recommendations for us, is to establish a sabbatical program, not just for our scientists to go outside, but also to host external scientists. It's not something that we've been able to see to fruition. But really, it's critical to sustaining a vital research workforce for careers of 30 years and more. Academics figured this out in the 1800s, and Harvard had their sabbatical program started in 1880. I think the rest of the Ivy League followed within 20 years after that. Not every individual needs a sabbatical. Obviously, different for different personality types, but I think there's enough fraction of professors that take them and that get revitalized from them, and ultimately they're there because they benefit the institution. Programs should be a minimal cost to the government, but the key thing is reemployment rights should be guaranteed back into the agency, so that when you're done with your year-long sabbatical or whatever, you should be able to come back and continue your work, and hopefully start new creative work. I'll just kind of close off this part of the talk, I guess, with some observations. So somehow or another, in order to have what I thought was an extraordinary scientific career, had to augment my own FTE. That meant working a whole lot of hours, but obviously that sacrificed my health and my family relationships. As Russ Wiener pointed out to me numerous times, it loses a key advantage of being a government employee. And so the other option, I guess, is to enroll others in the cause. So I had this vision statement, and I was fortunate to have postdoctoral support year after year. As anyone who's mentored postdocs knows, though, they're very eager to get a new job. They're always temporary, so you get into the cycle of training and then seeing a good slug of productivity, and then they're off, and then you're training again. The other option Ken explored with me just before he left our branch was to try to make me a team leader where I'd have some opportunity to give scientific direction without being supervisory. This may have worked. It does require a lot of, your branch chief has to give you a lot of latitude, and the division management has to be supportive and so forth. That didn't work out for me, so ultimately I set my eyes on becoming a branch chief, where could maybe set a vision for a whole branch and try to accomplish more that way. So early on, when I was in undergraduate and graduate school, I thought, I'm definitely going to become a professor. I'm going to be just like Rob Harley. Later on in my career, when I came to the government, I was like, I'm just going to be like Ken someday. It turned out, I think the lesson I learned, and hopefully I won't have to repeat this again, is emulate your idols, but don't expect to follow their career path. So professor or branch chief are not in the cards for me. But then something very unexpected happened. One day, sitting in my office, probably in the afternoon, and Dave Kryak comes by. Prakash, how would you like to be to do some service to the laboratory? And he started describing that, again, at the time, let's see, Larry Ryder had retired, Bob Dyer became our acting lab director, and Dave then was the acting director of the research planning and coordination staff. So there was this vacancy to do the acting lab directorship for the Air, Climate, and Energy program for Neural. And at that time it was a brand new program. So that sounded really cool. And David was persistent. He tried to get me on the detail the first time. It didn't fly with my management. As Ken put it, they like to keep us caged up with and locked in at AMAD, right? At that time, I guess in 9 years, nobody other than management or administrative assistants had been out of the division on detail. And so like others, my request for detail was denied. But David was persistent. He came back 3 or 4 months later and asked again, and it worked out. So I got to do a nice 21 months in the RPCS, which were, for those of you who've met David in the hallway, you might think he's just a joker, which he is. But working very closely with Dave, I really got to see a whole different side of his personality. He's an incredibly insightful manager. He made me aware of strengths that I didn't even know I had, like the sensitivity and the, I don't think Nathan would agree with you on those guys. But he helped me really develop a big picture perspective of science in the organization, seeing it from the lab side, the program side, and then giving us some insight into what's going on in those matrix meetings. Also, when I was staff, I used to think, oh, I wish the branch chief would do this, or why doesn't management do that? And being up in the RPCS, I got to see firsthand how many hours the managers in ORD work and how hard they work. That is, the lab directors, the associate directors, and all of them, ALDs and all that. Dave Kryak would send us emails at midnight usually, really long ones too, with usually very few typos. One of many jewels of wisdom that David imparted on me was about transparency. Because one of my gripes was, why don't managers explain their rationale for the decisions more? And basically he's explained that being transparent is a lot easier said than done. And he gave me the latitude to try it out myself with these neural-wide emails and trying to get more participation into the RAP process. And I learned firsthand that when you try to communicate to 300 intellectuals how difficult it is and how much time and energy it takes to explain and defend your rationale. But I still will stand on the soapbox here and say that I feel that transparency is really hugely critical to managing ORD. And the reason is that the opportunity cost for not being transparent is just ginormous. Researchers, as we all know, can be extremely driven. They'll work long hours to do something extremely creative. If they have the belief that it's meaningful, it will lead to some positive change in the agency or in the world. At the same time, researchers are very easily frustrated. If the decisions are made that are counterintuitive, or if they are the rationale is just not adequately explained, it just seems like lunacy, right? And that's a major morale buster. I just touched on this earlier. Why is transparency so hard to achieve? It's because of the type of people we're dealing with. We're trying to explain things, and convince scientists who have their own, their own slant on and their own way of looking at things. And this all takes the time and energy that it takes is something that our managers in ORD just don't have. So, I think the analysis is coming here. The key, I think, is that we need to have more objective decision making. And the reason is as follows. So the more objective the rationale is for making a decision, the more transparent that decision becomes, right? The more objective the rationale, the easier it is to defend the decision, because you can point back to the objective rationale. And also the less time and energy it takes to explain. After you've explained it once, twice, eventually you point them to the document, right? And they can figure it out and contest it, I guess, in writing. The problem, though, in developing any sort of objective decision-making framework is that it takes a lot of upfront effort to do that. That's one of the problems. I'll get to the other one later. But obviously the managers that we talked about, they don't have time to develop such frameworks. And moreover, even if they were to take the time to do that, it wouldn't work, because they only will fly if they have the buy-in of the researchers. So the solution is, of course, a partnership. Somehow enrolling researchers to help develop the framework, or develop the framework themselves in partnership with management. So I know the scientists in the room are thinking, this is ridiculous, right? The more time I spend developing these frameworks, the less time I have for real research. There's also the second problem I alluded to, which is there's a lot of cynicism that even the best laid framework may not be adhered to, because we see policies written in our ORD manual that aren't followed. So who's to say that this one will be? So there has to be, of course, some commitment from all levels of management that whatever is decided will be adhered to. But besides having a positive impact on the organization as a whole, if that's not enough motivation for the lab scientists, then there's opportunities to publish scholarly articles on these decision-making frameworks. It turns out, I've done a little bit of research on this, and how to successfully manage a non-profit research enterprise is an open research question. Most research R&D outfits have a profit motive, and those are the ones that are kind of well managed, but the ones that are not for profit, we're all kind of flailing in one way or another. And there's journals that will publish this stuff. So if it's something, I think there's opportunities to get it into the peer-reviewed literature. I'm going to skip over these in the interest of time. Well, there's the concentric pie chart that David was talking about. But the bottom line is, to effectively manage in a scientific research organizations, we should use scientific principles for explaining for justifying our decisions, objectivity and metrics. We need to enroll researchers in developing such frameworks. Let's go ahead and take that extra step and publish our processes in peer-reviewed literature, and then let's get commitment from upper management to adhere to those processes. I think if we do this, ORD can lead the world in how to manage nonprofit research enterprises, because we'll be some of the first to publish in this arena. And in fact, Bill Benson was very supportive of this when he was our lab director. He was saying, this kind of scholarly work is what we need to do to show the guys in NOAA and NASA that how to get a research program well managed and functioning. I'll cap off my brief acting period as the assistant lab director, and my reflection back on that is it can be a really fun and rewarding job, but I think it gets very trying in a period of repeated declining resources. If it's a flat or increasing budget, there's a lot of interesting work that can be done there. So my hat's off to those who've been ALDs for all these past 7 or 8 years. Carlos Nunez, Ross Highsmith, and many others for sticking it out and doing that hard work. Last couple bits of gratitude. Tom Pierce. It's Tom here. Yes. Tom is one, and I could put David Mobley's picture up here as well, but I'll have some specific things to say about Tom. A real stellar example of the work ethic that we witness among our EPA managers. Tom's in, 6:30 in the morning every day, even after going for a camp out or barbecuing late the previous night till midnight, and doing work that many of the scientists wouldn't want to do, but keeping the division rolling. He, I think, single-handedly rescued me from my ALD duties by inviting me back to the division as the senior science advisor, which was too glorious of a title, I guess, for me to pass up. And back in the division, ST had retired. Rohit is now the interim director, and he gave me a lot of scientific flexibility to pursue different areas that I thought would be fruitful for the division, like modeling and air pollution epidemiology. He really tried his best to minimize my kind of bureaucratic responsibilities. And even last year, since he actually learned about my intents before I sent out the mass email, but he was very empathetic about the decision to try to move overseas. I'd say the only downside of being the science advisor for Rohit was that he's such a stellar scientist, he just didn't need that much advice. And so at times I kind of felt like, what am I, this whole title is a bit of a farce. But last but not least, my wife Nita, who's here today, really has weathered through some tough times with me and really enabled me to have a very productive career at EPA. I won't say more, but she knows more than that. As promised, some pictures of Nepal. A lot of people have asked, why are you moving? What are you going to do there? And so forth. Something that's made the decision, there's a couple things that made the decision really difficult. The first being that we realized that the quality of life can't get much better than here in RTP. This is most prominent in my mind after each trip to India, when I returned from India after my biannual trip. Just kind of driving down Davis Drive and seeing like what an amazing infrastructure we have, the beautiful trees and the smooth road and the heated home and everything. So we're definitely not seeking greener pastures by going abroad. And the second thing is that really there was no urging from anybody for us to move. It wasn't like, you used to be IBM and now you're Lenovo and hey, why don't you go to Beijing? It wasn't one of those deals. Although once we announced it last August, most everybody has been supportive. In the email that many of you got last summer, I chalked out 4 reasons why we're thinking about moving abroad, and now that we have an actual job that we're in a place, the country we're moving to, I did some reflection on whether those 4 reasons were maybe realized. So the first was for personal development, breaking out of the cocoon, becoming more worldly. There's going to be tremendous opportunities for spiritual growth. It seemed in Kathmandu, every street corner has a temple of some sort on it. This was one that was in a particularly magnificent setting. We'll have to learn how to be a little bit more patient. Things in the developing world are not nearly as efficient as what we're used to due to infrastructure and culture. Here's a picture of the baggage claim in Kathmandu domestic airport where they haul one bag at a time over the fence here, and then you kind of fight for your bag. And here's a dysfunctional crosswalk signal. I pushed that button and waited 10 minutes and then walked like the rest of everybody. Power is very scarce, so there's rolling blackouts even in the city of Kathmandu that they call load sharing, so that's 12 hours a day of blackouts for every part of the city that just keeps rotating. There is a lot of solar power that doesn't quite supplement. There's a lot of water because it's amongst the Himalayas, you have the glaciers on all sides, but the supply is very poor, so there's going to be very little running water from the municipality, which means that for our home we'll have to have an underground well, and then to get water at pressure we'll have to pump that water up to an overhead storage tank. But of course you can only pump the water up during the 12 hours when you have electricity, so there's going to be some challenges, and I think those are all kind of opportunities for personal development for Nita and I. The second reason I threw out at that time was for the growth of our children, give them a unique perspective of and appreciate that not everywhere is as nice as we have here in North Carolina. We're going to enroll them in the British school. I think they're taking the admission exam right now, so I hope they're doing well. The British School of Kathmandu, where they'll have a very diverse student body. 1/3 of the kids are from Britain, 1/3 from Nepal, 1/3 from all over the rest of the world. They'll hopefully learn by seeing that not all of our fruits just don't appear at the grocery store. This is a woman, I think in about her 40s, who had been scaling up and down these foothills to different orange trees, plucking the oranges and carrying them on her back at very steep inclines, and then dumping them into this area where at the end of the day one truck would come and take a load down the mountain. There's me getting the fruits of labor. There's glimpses of extreme poverty. This is a gentleman here who had to, at the end of the paving of this road, had a pile of gravel which they didn't want to waste, and so he had to transport it somewhere, and he actually shoveled it into the basket that was being carried by this 60-year-old woman. And I watched as he shoveled it in, and she was bearing the weight and weeping, and then walked off to wherever the destination for that gravel was next. The third reason for wanting to move abroad, and at the time it wasn't Nepal, but I'd applied to jobs in Europe and Africa and Asia. But the idea was I felt that I could provide more benefit to the global environment by working in another country and look for air pollution problems that are more severe than we have in the U.S. And in doing so, while reducing their local air pollution, it will also, of course, help address global climate change because we'll be reducing the short-lived climate pollutants, the SLCPs. So as everybody here knows, and anyone who went to Rich Mason's seminar on Wednesday knows that our air is getting cleaner. Just about every source of air pollution other than, I think, oil and gas have declined in the last few years, the last decade, rather. PM 2.5, I think most of you know about this. So let's just look at the top of this orange graph, which is from the EPA Trends Report. So these are the most polluted sites in the US, and their annual average PM 2.5 levels, which about 10 years ago or 13 years ago were at 17 micrograms per cubic meter. And now the vast majority of them are underneath they're about 13 micrograms per cubic meter. So basically, let's see. So only the yellow and the red dots, I guess, were in non-attainment until we decided that 15 micrograms wasn't a safe enough threshold and lowered the standard further to 12. And now there's a few more non-attainment areas here in the Midwest, the light blue circles and the central California circles. But just to put that in perspective, that red line here is the roughly 12 micrograms per cubic meter. And this is PM 2.5 concentrations in downtown Kathmandu. The annual average, I think, that year was something like 70 micrograms per cubic meter. And it's gotten a little bit worse since then, since the overthrow of the monarchy. One of the results of PM, of course, is that low visibility. One thing that we're trying to do is demonstrate that lower visibility means less tourism dollars and less, which is the main industry in Nepal. So less money for all the people. One interesting thing that I've realized after I got this job and have been telling people about it, there's an assumption if you're moving to a developing world, then you must be doing something fairly low tech over there, like digging wells so that people don't get malaria. But actually, the rest of the world has caught up a lot technologically, although their model performance is not near where ours is in the US for PM. They do have, what I will be doing is much like the technical work that I've been doing here at EPA. So the first project is on source apportionment. There was a very large field campaign done in Kathmandu for about 6 months where they had a number of filter-based and continuous instruments, including like a PTRMS and aerodynamic mass spec. So I'll be doing some source apportionment using receptor-based models like positive matrix factorization. We want to know whether it's the diesel soot or the cook stoves or the brick kilns or the vegetative roadside burning or the garbage burning that's causing the bulk of the pollution, so that we can give that information back to the Nepali government to address. I'll also be doing source-based modeling, so I'll be learning about smoke and the emission processing so that we can do tagged source apportionment modeling using something like CMEC. The second project, so the first project is the urban scale source apportionment. The second one is more of a regional scale issue. So this is dark blue is the map of the Himalayas. And I was astonished there's actually 240 million people living in the Himalayas. The light blue is the portion of Asia that gets all of their water pretty much from the Himalayan runoff. So that's an additional 1.3 billion people. So one of the big questions in the region is the concern over glacial melting. Where is the black carbon coming from is the question. So apparently black carbon, there's some estimates that about 30% of the glacial melting is due to black carbon depositing on these glaciers. This is a picture from winter of '73, and it's a picture of the same mountain face that's pretty much been deglaciated in that time. And so we'll do some, again, tagged source apportionment type modeling where the question here will be, of the black carbon depositing on the glaciers, how much is coming from each of the different countries? Right? And so the funding for that work has been given to ICIMOD, which will be my new employer. That's the International Center for Integrated Mountain Development. They're headquartered in Kathmandu, but they're co-funded by 8 federal governments, India, China, Pakistan, Afghanistan, Nepal, Bangladesh, Bhutan, and Myanmar. I think I'm going to be quizzed on that on my first day at work, so good that I got it. So yeah, if any one of the countries were to do that analysis of, China saying, oh, most of the black carbon's coming from you, India, then it wouldn't really, it wouldn't lead anywhere. So they've all co-funded this agency to do that work, and that's that'll be one of my primary projects. There's a picture of the building. It's an agency of about 200 people. About half of them are not from Nepal. English is the spoken language at the workplace. And just a really fascinating, they're a matrixed R&D organization. About 1/8 of their employees work on communications or knowledge sharing. So they're 25 out of the staff of 200 just on communications, which is interesting. A couple of the projects that I'll be tangentially involved in is working on a feature film about air pollution in Nepal. see if we can affect some of the, like we talk about having more social scientists in ORD. I think I'll get some experience in how to influence behavioral change through this process. There's also research experts on tourism, so we're going to be looking at the influence of air pollution on tourism. The fourth and last reason for moving that I quoted in that email last summer was to reduce our own environmental footprint, our individual footprint. And there's going to be lots of opportunities for that. I try to ride my bike to work here once a week, but in Nepal I think we'll be able to do a lot more. I'll probably be the fastest vehicle on the road over there. I tried it out during the interview and rode around, and I indeed did pass the buses and the trucks, which is a lot of fun. Of course, I have to watch out for my air pollution exposure because the on-road concentrations are enormous. Be eating very sattvic food, so very unprocessed vegetarian food. This is a picture of the cafeteria at Isimad. I think this meal, I think it cost me 60 cents. So I think that's where I'll be going a lot of times for lunch. And we talked about earlier, we'll be consuming less electricity. Mainly, one of the difficult things is there's no central heating in the homes. So we'll be doing kind of interesting things to keep ourselves warm in the wintertime, putting in hot water bottles under the sheets before climbing in and things like that. So learning some tricks and how to live more sustainably that hopefully we can bring back here. One thing I've been saying to people, and I want to go public with this, is that we'd really love to have visitors in Nepal. All of you I consider friends, and just so that you know that you wouldn't be encumbering us by visiting. Mita's, one of her plans is to open a small bed and breakfast adjacent to our house where you can definitely overcome jet lag, go at walking distance from some World Heritage sites. And actually, the cool thing is like just a bit of a drive from Kathmandu, you can take a jungle safari where you ride on the back of elephants to see the tigers and rhinos. Or go the other way north and hit the Himalayas. And that, I'll close and take any comments. So, none?
So we're
transitioning to reception. Question?
Transition to the reception.
Yes, we have a plan for that.
I was part of the plan.
You were part of the plan too. Okay, let me do my part of the plan first.
Okay,
Because I didn't do it
part
first.
of the plan.
Okay, cool. So, I wanted to sing a song, and this is a song I think. So basically to transition from the stuffy kind of seminar atmosphere to the reception that Tanya Sparrow and Deborah Lord and several other friends were gracious to organize. This is a song I think that embodies a lot of the work we do at EPA and what I'll be working on in Isimode. It's Heal the World by Michael Jackson, so feel free to sing along. I'll need help in the chorus at the end. There's a place in your heart, and I know that it is love, and this place is much brighter than tomorrow. And if you really try, you'll find there's no need to cry. In this place, you'll feel there's no hurt or sorrow. There are ways to get there, if you care enough for the living, to make a better place. Make a better space, heal the world, make it a better place for you and for me and the entire human race. There are people dying, if you care enough for the living, to make a better place for you and for me. If you want to know why, there's a love that cannot lie. Love is strong, it only cares for joyful giving. If we try, we shall see. In this bliss we cannot feel fear or dread. We stop existing and start living. And it feels that always love's enough for us growing to make a better world. Make
a better world, heal the world, make it a better place for you and for me and the entire human race. There are people dying. If you care enough for the living, to make a better place for you and for me. And the dreams we once conceived of will reveal a joyful face, and the world we once believed in will shine again in grace. Then why do we keep strangling life, wound this earth, crucify its soul? Though it's plain to see this world is heavenly, be God's glow. We could fly so high, let our spirits never die. In my heart, I feel you, all of my brothers. Create a world with no combustion. Together we'll sustain this earth. We'll see the nations turn coal plants into wind farms. And there are ways to get there, if we care enough for the living, to make a better place, make a better space, heal the world, make it a better place for you and for me and the entire human race. There are people dying. If you care enough for the living, to make a better place for you and for me. You and for me, you and for me, you and for me, you and for me. Heal the world we live in, save it for our children. Heal the world we live in, save it for our children. Heal the world we live in, save it for our children.
Thank you.
I have a question.
Okay.
Sorry, but I have to ask, when you heard that was a matrix format, was that an additional motivation to make the move?
I think it helped me in the interview. It's one of these kind of unexpected things, right? I never thought that being a part of the Matrix and ORD would help me get a job in Nepal, but it probably did a little bit. You guys know how the Matrix works. They'll be surprised, I think.
So that was a great song. Gosh, I didn't know that was coming. And, so I think about adults and kids all the time, as I have a younger daughter, a 9-year-old, and I look at her and I think of all the things that I try to hide from her, the things I'm hiding from her that I don't ever want to catch her doing. And so I hide it all. And it's one of my observations, Prakash, you are just, you're out there. You're not afraid. And I can't say that I've ever seen you do anything that you wouldn't be able to do in front of your children that you shouldn't just be amazingly proud. And Anita, you have all the reason in the world to be proud. You really do. So this portion, I think, is where it's going to get probably mushy or good and roasty. So as we're cutting in, we had a couple people who had kind of pre-reserved time and wanted to say a few things. But I also want to make that opportunity while the first few people are going on. If there are others who might think of something they want to say, either in support of Prakash or at the expense of Prakash. We can move on with that, and then I think there's another one more to close things up. So Heather, Simon, I don't know if you still want to say a few things. I can probably give you this. There you go.
Do I get the drum?
So, as Prakash mentioned, there was 5 of us, I think, who were postdocs under him, and he also mentored several students throughout his time. And anyone who's worked with Prakash knows the thought and dedication that he brings to his work and his science. And he brought that same thought and dedication to his mentoring. One of the things that I really admire about Prakash is the way that anytime he's working on something or in his own, just in his own work, he always is evaluating and thinking about, what am I doing well? What can I improve on? What are the things that need work? And he brought that to his mentoring as well, which is not always easy to do, but he was always very honest in evaluating us and letting us know, or at least in my personal experience, letting me know what I was doing well and where I could improve. And I think that his honest feedback, in addition to all of just seeing him as a role model, really helped me be a better scientist and a better speaker and a better writer. So just want to say thank you, and you'll definitely be missed. So.
Next, I think Chris Nolte wants the microphone or the microphone. It's on.
Hi, so one of the postdocs that Prakash mentored was Jim Kelly, who's just had a baby last week, or maybe 2 weeks ago. So he couldn't be here, but he wrote this testimonial for me to read, or at least in part, since it's a little long. Prakash is a master at developing timely, practical solutions to air quality modeling problems that are informed, but not overburdened, by complex technical science. In developing these solutions, Prakash first clearly identifies the needs for model developments through literature searching and discussions with the scientific community. He then builds a team to address the high-priority issues he has identified. Prakash's teams typically consist of EPA postdocs and staff, as well as external collaborators. He is able to articulate his vision and provide guidance to the team while allowing team members to pursue their own ideas and develop professionally. In this way, Prakash is able to meet the organization's goals while expanding the scope of his impact and providing training to a next generation of environmental scientists. In addition to providing mentorship on technical matters, Prakash provides an excellent example to his mentees of how to conduct oneself in a respectful and professional way while interacting with diverse groups across the agency. His warm manner and informed judgment have enabled him to develop friendships and strong working relationships with employees throughout EPA, and he takes time to know his colleagues as individuals despite the many demands on his time. Prakash's friendships add enjoyment to his and the working lives of those around him, and provide him with a unique perspective on issues and concerns facing different parts of the agency. It is truly amazing to see how Prakash is able to nurture and maintain so many relationships throughout EPA and be universally liked despite having a high workload and strong opinions on key issues facing the agency. In summary, observing and working with Prakash has provided me with great insights on how to effectively conduct myself as a scientist at EPA. I'm also extremely grateful to Prakash for being a strong advocate for me and providing key support as I have pursued challenging career goals. Having someone of Prakash's stature behind me as I pursued my first positions as an air quality modeler gave me the necessary credibility to make my start on a rewarding career path. I'm very grateful for this. It is critical for young scientists to have the active support of a mentor as they begin their career, and I'm truly one of the lucky ones to have had the support and direction of Prakash. So I have little to add to what Jim said, and I will note that I have not had over 3,000 hours of public speaking experience in this part of the show, but at least I won't try to sing. That would be even worse. But when I was thinking about what little I could add, to what Jim didn't say, a lot of it's been touched on already by David and by Heather. That Prakash's really unique ability to combine big picture visionary science with also technical know-how and attention to detail, and to actually see this big vision come to fruition. So I'm confident he will bring this unique combination of that big picture vision and with a thorough and systematic detail at both a scientific level and also a team building level in working with and organizing a team to the new position at ICMOD to make a big impact on the environment and improve lives for people in the region.
many were follow the leader on the playground? Just put that on the computer. For folks who were at ST's retirement, you may understand this next comment, but for those who weren't, I'll just describe it real quickly. During the testimonials and different things that were said, there was little skits. He's very good at doing their retirement skits. And there was a little skit where John Plime had suggested some evil masterminding to take CMAC and call it the Plime. So I just ask, Prakash, as you go out there, please use your power for good. So if there are others who would like, is there anyone else who'd like to make a public, feel free to do so. Otherwise, I think Prakash is going to be around and we can privately share.
Well, I'll make this quick. It's very personal. I first met Prakash when I was a postdoc at Caltech, and I was wandering the halls of the environmental engineering building looking for Glenn Cass. And I stuck my head into this little computer lab across from his office, and there was Prakash. And I looked at him and I said, "Who are you? I've never seen you before." And, he grinned, leaned back from his computer and smiled and introduced himself. And I said, "How do you spell your last name?" He said, B-H-A-V-E. And I said, "Oh, behave." And he didn't laugh, It's not a bad thing that he doesn't understand my piracy work, but, he got here about a year, about the same year that I got here. And I've been sitting in NCA watching his career just skyrocket over the time that I've been here. And instead of being jealous of this youngster, who were following the same, career path, he's really made me love him, And I know, Neural isn't the only one who's benefited from Prakash. He's had an influence on everybody else who's known him and worked with him. And I find, and I had in mind to say exactly the same things that Dave said, so I don't want to repeat him. But the energy that he's given our entire organization is so warm and positive. He's helped build a community, that just comes from knowing him. We all know Prakash. We all have the same warm feelings for him. And so I think we're suffering a major loss. And but I want to say one more thing, and that is thanks for starting the Berkeley Caltech alumni lunch group, because that gives John Crowden and I an opportunity to yell "Go Bears" in the hallway all the time. So.
Why is that? Nobody wants to repeat me. So I think. One more. Okay.
Yeah. I didn't plan on speak anything because my two kids play the chess and learn chess from Prakash for the almost last 2 years, and in their basement, and once a month, and this activity becomes their most happy things every month. Because Prakash is leaving, I talked to my two kids and said, "What you learn from Prakash?" Beside chess, my daughter said, "You know what? I learned how to be a better person, how to care about others, and how to really talk to little kids, something like that." And also, Prakash is becoming my son's role model, and my daughter, even she's still in elementary school. And one day she said, "Mom, you know what? Prakash is the projection husband's personality." I was so surprised. So yeah, and thanks for Prakash and Lisa, and thanks. And the kids, they are really miss the chess club, miss everything, and miss everything. Thanks.
Thank you. I'm Carsten Baumann. I'm with Atmosphere Research and Analysis, and I know Prakash from our mutual times at Georgia Tech. He mentioned in his talk that he was the last PhD student of Glenn Cass, who happened to be the chair of the School of Earth and Atmospheric Sciences during our mutual time. And he impressed me there. Glenn Cass deceased, and we had a celebration celebrating his legacy, Glenn Cass's legacy, and I remember Prakash finding wonderful words as his last PhD student. Impressed me very much with that, and we enjoyed each other. I'm a senior. I was employed at Georgia Tech as an engineer. He was the scientist, but he made me feel very comfortable, demonstrating that the engineers can very well work together with scientists. We happen to live in the same neighborhood now here at Morrisville, and so when he runs around the lakes, I run sometimes by his house. And I happen to be the vice president of the Morrisville Community Garden, and hopefully once you come back, we may have a big community garden where we can demonstrate that the kids here in this town can also learn how to grow healthy food. So hopefully my family will find the time to visit you sometime in Kathmandu. Thanks for the invitation.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Deborah Lloyd. I'm one of the C's over at AMAD. I haven't had the pleasure like everybody else to be with Prakash over 25 years. 10 years? Or was it 7? But all I can say is, yes, you will be missed. I will miss our talks. I miss not getting a chance to ride our bikes together, but I will be riding. And I'm not a meteorologist, I'm not a scientist, but I've learned so much from this young man, and I do appreciate you. I appreciated meeting your wife for the first time, and I too will be coming to Naples to visit. Good luck.
Thank you. When I first started as a postdoc, as one of 2 at the time statisticians within the division, I was pretty intimidated by all the atmospheric scientists and all the acronyms people were throwing around. But Prakash, who wasn't even my mentor, didn't know me, invited me to lunch, and that was my first impression of him. And we ended up having this long conversation about my career goals and what I was going to do, and I had just met him, so I just wanted to say thank you for that. Prakash's youngest son is just a few months older than my daughter. And I remember when Sumant was born, he told me his name meant one that gives good advice. And I've always remembered that because I think he has good footsteps to follow in, because you've always given me extremely good advice on things in terms of careers, but also in terms of being a new parent. So I thank you for that. And also wanted you both to know that I'm completely inspired by what you're doing, and it's been really neat to go in our jogs in the last year, see this journey unfold and how you got the idea in your head and then completely made it happen. And so bravo to you both. I think it's wonderful. Thanks.
Once, going twice, 3 times. Tom Peters, our last speaker.
Well, there are 2 characteristics about Prakash that come to mind. That is courage and curiosity. To uproot your family like he is doing, leaving the safe confines of this environment, I'm just astounded. I'm very amazed, and I wish you all the best. And also his curiosity. One thing I tell my kids, that's the #1 attribute you can carry through in life, is to be curious. And you have an amazing way of looking at problems and coming up with different solutions. So this is just one step in your journey of life. And life is probably organized in maybe 10-year segments. So you have spent 10 years here at the EPA. And it just so happens, last Friday, this is your 10-year certificate of appreciation. A number of folks, though, gave generously when they heard that Prakash was leaving. And this is really unprecedented for someone leaving after only 10 years. But here's a card. I'm not sure who signed it, but lots of folks did. And hey guys, how am I supposed to present these gifts? Okay. Anyway, here are some gifts for you, many of us here at EPA.
Oh, wow. It says home on it. Our state, North Carolina. Very cool. I'll wear this with pride.
For the cool mountain nights. Yes.
Should I open these now? Okay. Oh, wow. This is a beginner's, basic Nepali, a beginner's guide. 3 audio CDs, that'll come in very handy. I think we'll need to use this to communicate with Suman pretty soon, our oldest one.
So anyway, on behalf of everyone in the division, and I'm sure everyone here at IRTP, we wish you all the best.
Thanks, Tom.
Thank you.
Really would have thought a couple of batteries and a few bottles of water. I think we all share. Those of us who are still saying, wow, how crazy. I think we're looking at ourselves saying, we have the courage. I hope we can all focus and realize that it's bold. It's bold. So thanks for going out there on behalf of all of us to save the world. So I'm going to take credit for something. Save the world for all of us. With that, unless we have anybody else that wants a testimonial or a roast, we've got right. We've got some snacks back there and some refreshments, and so take a moment to say goodbye. Thank you.